The whole thing about words actually brings me to a piece of their content very late on in the paper where they talk about 1984. And they talk about the language that's used in evidence-based medicine reminds them of Newspeak from 1984. So for those of you that haven't read the book, basically it's this, it's the future and everything sucks. England is part of this big country called Oceania, which is basically like it's this gigantic socialist entity that includes like the United States and the Western Hemisphere and England, and they're changing the language. They're producing this new language called Newspeak. They're making up new words, and the idea is that the language, none of the words in the language have any kind of moral value. They're just, they're just words. So, an adjective is neither good nor bad. It's merely descriptive, and then the meaning is put in place by the situation. And they talk about how the scientific discourse is like Newspeak, in that one of the appendices in 1984 talks about how the idea is that Newspeak, by eliminating the word for democracy or eliminating making the word for equal mean exactly the same in a physical sense, they will make the sentence, the example they give, I recall, is all man's is equal. Like, they make that sentence to have no more meaning than all man's is red hair. And, that's a bad thing because it destroys the language. See, I think this is wrong. I think that the concept that, all thought is in language, and therefore by controlling language you control thought, is simply wrong. So, for instance, has anyone ever smelled something that was indescribable? I mean, you had a thought. You thought about the smell. You couldn't describe it. You couldn't put it in words. Or have you ever had a thought that you simply couldn't express in words? If you only thought in words, you would never have that experience. That experience would be impossible. If I describe to you, if I say, oh, think of a beach, you think of a beach. You think of the sights of a beach, the sounds of a beach, the tactile sensation, the smells, everything, totally independently of like a written description of a beach. And then you could describe it to me. Of course you could describe it to me, but information would be lost. It would be translated. And, which implies that it had to exist in another format. So language does not control thinking, and that's, I'm sorry, goodbye. That point, by the way, was borrowed from Steven Pinker and his book, The Blank Slate, which you can go read. Finally, I want to talk about, they cite the work of Deleuze and Guattari. Of course, I'm pronouncing those incorrectly. Two postmodern philosophers. They also name-check Foucault and a couple of other people. I know that this is in a medical journal. The thing to recognize about that is that it's a power grab. So let's say that you publish a paper that talks about, doing a southern hybridization, and some radio imaging, and they claim that they've found a link between a gene in a virus and a gene in a cancer line. And let's say that you handed that paper to my mom. It would take her, probably a year's worth of schooling, of just sort of generalized schooling in cell biology before she would be able to pick up that paper and, make heads or tails of most of it. And it would take a lot more training before she was able to say, well, there's a hole here, there's a hole here, and then she'd have to do a lot of research work before she could get to the point where she said, no, this is wrong because we have this other evidence, and our evidence not only explains why they get their evidence, but it also shows that it's wrong. And so, in other words, in order to challenge the conclusions of the paper, she would have to submit herself to the hierarchy of science and work her way up. This is a good thing because you don't want people just walking in the street and making up science. Like that just it would be quite chaotic. Anyway, my argument as regards to this paper is that it represents a kind of power grab. It says if you want to critique this paper, understand it, you need to go out and read and understand Deleuze and Guattari and the whole postmodern thing and get into it and, you know, learn to put quotes around things and talk in strange sentences. And so basically what's going on here is that I imagine sort of a battle over the turf of health sciences. You know, you get this hierarchy of science and this hierarchy of postmodernist thinking. Because remember, one of these people's from the English department. Anyway, you got these two battling. You've got fighting ivory towers. Okay. Which, okay, you got fighting ivory towers. A bunch of academics, you know, going at each other. They do declare war in here, which it's you know, science wars. Ooh. Anyway, let me put it this way. I'm a medical student. There are 24 hours in a day. Well, this is 12, but you know, you can imagine it going around twice. Okay, I'm a medical student. There are 24 hours in a day. At some distant point in the future, I will acquire a medical license. I could be responsible for your treatment or the treatment of a loved one. Now, do you want me reading physiology? Which is what would happen if the scientific ivory tower won. Do you want me reading physiology, or do you want me reading Foucault?